Got questions about the Brazos, no more unknowns. Ever wonder where that water comes from or where it goes? We're unpacking the Brazos River.
Welcome to the inaugural Brazos River Authority podcast, Unpacking the Brazos River. I'm Charlie Shugart, and I'm with our Public Information Office, and we are excited for a new venue to talk about everything from where your water comes from, how evaporation impacts lake levels, facts about the Brazos, the future of Texas water, and so much more. But today's focus is on something you might have in your home, fish tanks. Here with me today is Tiffany Malzahn, the BRA's Chief Environmental Officer. Thanks for joining me today, Tiffany.
Hello.
Tiffany, this is the first time our listeners are meeting you, so tell us a little bit about your history with the BRA.
I started a very long time ago as an aquatic biologist out in the field collecting water quality samples and performing biological assessments at the Brazos Basin, and over the years have held a variety of different positions within BRA, and am currently the Chief Environmental Officer over the environmental program, our regulatory compliance program, and emergency management and business continuity planning.
Awesome. So also joining us is Jeremy Nickolai. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Tell us a little bit about your role at the BRA.
I am the field operations manager here. I've been here 17 years, and like Tiffany, I started as an aquatic scientist, doing biology stuff, chasing water quality samples around the basin and things like that. Now I have a team of 6 aquatic scientists who do all that, and yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. So this podcast episode is for you. If you've got a fish tank, are thinking about getting one, or I don't know, maybe your bestie can't stop talking about their aquatic pals, or maybe, just maybe, you just love to learn and care about our waterways. So you've got a fish tank, and let's say this fish tank used to be your happy place, but life is unpredictable, right? And things change. And maybe taking care of your fishy pals might not be working out anymore. So what then? Where does Bubbles the goldfish go when his current home can no longer be his haven? And what in the world does that have to do with the BRA? So word on the street is that the last thing you should do with your aquarium fish and plants is dump them in your local water body when you're done with them. Why would that matter?
Because a lot of those aquarium fish are not native species to the state of Texas, and same with the aquarium plants. There's a lot of plants sold for aquariums that are not native. Once out in the environment, those species don't have any natural predators, and so a lot of them do very well, and they can do a lot of damage to our environment. One, for instance, the armored catfish is a voracious vegetation eater, so he can, quickly denude natural vegetation that native fish need for nursery areas, cover from predators, everything else. He can completely consume necessary vegetation. Also, again, nothing eats him, so if
Nothing eats him?
I'm sure there's probably something somewhere that would eat him. A raccoon would probably not distinguish, but in the natural world, there's always balances, and we don't have that natural balance in the aquatic ecosystem for him.
And those Plecostomus, which are sucker-mouth fish or the armored catfish.
Catfish, yeah. So that's the thing, like heavy on the armored, So they're a little tough to kill and chew on.
And those are popular in fish tanks.
Yeah, because they like eat all the algae off the glass on the fish tanks.
And so once they get out there, the other thing, plants are really invasive, and plants are easily transported around the state.
What do you mean?
So common aquatic plants, we've seen giant salvinia get sold for fish tanks, water hyacinth, hydrilla, and a lot of those, you get them in a water body or a lake, and they can attach to a boat trailer, a kayak, something very easily, and be moved from one water body to another. A lot of those foreign plants also have some unique reproductive strategies. So if you see water hyacinth and you want to go in there and fish it, and you run through there with your boat motor and chop it up, every little piece has the capability of regrowing into a completely new plant. So it can get out of control quickly. We partner with Parks and Wildlife. We've got some in Lake Limestone, and we have worked with them for at least 14 years, periodically trying to treat and control, and we never seem to fully get rid of it. We might knock it back for a couple years, and then, our lake staff will send me a picture. Is this one? And it's like, yes, it is. And so I know we so far have avoided seeing giant salvinia in our basin, but I know over in East Texas it wreaks havoc for lake managers over there, and really causes them quite a bit of problems in managing their reservoirs. We do have some hydrilla in the basin periodically too. Fortunately, hasn't ever reached a level that's become a major problem, but it certainly could.
Are there any other popular fish tank fish that we've seen in different water bodies?
So you mentioned goldfish, and it's a little anecdote here. We've actually caught goldfish in our biological sampling, and like one in particular that I remember. I think you think of a goldfish, like 1 or 2 inches, and so what is the Japanese pond?
Koi fish.
So they're a goldfish. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're a type of goldfish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember if it might have been an actual goldfish, but it was probably 7, 8 inches long, so they'll grow out there, and that's pretty atypical.
I think we've also seen tilapia, and in one rare occasion, and it was a very unique situation, that there was a fish kill occurring down in the Sugarland area in some of the man-made drainage canals where we actually found lionfish.
Oh. Yeah, they don't belong there.
Which is typically a coastal oceanic species from northern Asia, but they definitely didn't migrate there naturally.
So we talked a little bit about, not being or having natural predators for some of these species. Are there long-term impacts of introducing the wrong species to lakes or rivers?
That's a really good question. So there's, some really big impacts. There's ecological impacts, which we hit on a little bit. There's some economic impacts of, invasive species, and there can be even human health impacts. Disrupt food webs, alters the habitat. And another thing is it reduces like the biodiversity.
Why is that important? If it reduces the biodiversity?
Right. So, this gets into like, an ecosystem is like a machine, and if you start pulling parts out of a machine, that machine isn't going to function like it's supposed to function. So, things like bait bucket introductions. When I was working for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, everybody probably in Texas knows what a red shiner is. In Utah, that is an invasive species. They reproduce so well in the state of Utah that they took up all the habitat for, the woundfin minnow. So what ended up happening is that woundfin minnow ended up getting put on the endangered species list. So, a lot of time and money and effort was spent to try to eradicate the red shiner out of that basin or out of that stream system, to see if they could get the woundfin minnow back up. And that sort of leads into like the economic impacts. And especially for us, and speaking of zebra mussels, which is another invasive species in the basin, because of what they do, they get into pipes and they start clogging them up and stuff like that. We end up having to spend money to try to mitigate the effects of zebra mussels on our infrastructure. And what that ends up doing is raising the costs of our operation, which we have to pass on to our customers.
And zebra mussels also can affect your boat if you are.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not even just the infrastructure impact, which is the biggest and most expensive one. But simple little things, us as professional biologists who are pulling our boats all over the basin, it essentially requires we have to, whenever we put our boats in an infected reservoir, either we have to bring it back and go through an extensive cleaning process, let that boat dry. So basically you have to have multiple boats, some dedicated to the lakes with zebra mussels and others not. There's also recreational impacts to it of, if you're being a responsible recreational person, whether it's a kayaker or a fisherman or a water skier, you need to let your gear and equipment basically dry for 10 to 14 days before you go anywhere else with it. We've been somewhat fortunate in the basin in that our drought flood cycle does seem to keep the population somewhat in check, because once they are exposed during a drought, high heat and long-term exposure to air out of water, will knock them back. So we have some natural population control that other parts of the United States don't experience. So while it's definitely been an infrastructure impact on pipelines, marinas, structures like that, it hasn't been as bad for us as it could be. What you see the states north of us, Kansas up to the Great Lakes, it's a real significant disruptor.
So I'm assuming not all invasive species come from your home fish tank. Where do they come from?
Well, so, like the zebra mussel, for example, I think they suspect it came in, it's an Asian species, I believe.
Asian, Northern European, and they believe it came in attached on a ship.
Or in the blast water of those ships.
Yeah, the ship that was making deliveries into the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
And then it has, over the last, I think, 30 years, when it was first noticed, slowly marched south and out and made their way down. And there was one time a belief that we were too warm and they'd never maybe get past Nebraska, Kansas, and their reproductive capacity allows them to adjust their tolerance relatively quickly. And so they marched right through Kansas, got to Oklahoma. It took them a little time. They adapted to Oklahoma temperatures and just have kept marching south.
Some, introductions could be maybe sport fish, kind of blew up, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and they would put, spotted bass, like in cold water reservoirs in Utah, and those bass absolutely outcompeted like the native lake trout and stuff like that. And there's funny things, like there was this big push, like, again, late 70s, mid 80s and stuff like that, where there would be, oh gosh, I can't remember all the things, but they would bring in like a bug to eat another bug that was an invasive, and that invasive bug would eat the other bug, and then it would start eating native bugs, things like that.
And there's been some of that in Texas. Salt cedar is in our upper basin, and it's in a lot of the upper basins. It was originally brought here, my understanding, mainly from the Middle East for bank stabilization.
Salt cedar's a tree?
Yeah,
A
a
shrub.
shrub.
A shrub.
Okay.
And so then there was a lot of work to look into what eats it in its native environment. They brought that bug over, and it was effective at controlling it. Honestly, we didn't see a whole lot of negative impacts until the country of Mexico raised its hand.
Yeah.
And said, hey, your bug has crossed the border and it's eating some of our native vegetation, and it was... There are still areas where I think we're using the bugs as potential treatment, but I think it's gone down significantly, and I think they're trying to keep it off the border. Like Jeremy was talking with the fish, we have the same example that he used from Utah and San Marcos. We have the endangered fountain darter, and the San Marcos and Comal rivers have been found to have tilapia, which is an introduced non-native species, and the armored catfish. And there's a lot of concern and work there on trying to make sure those invasives aren't negatively impacting the federally protected fountain darter. So,
and to kind of jump in on that tamarisk or the salt cedar, and why that's a bad thing is it is a transpiration machine, and what it does is it sucks tons of water out of, so it lives on the floodplain in a river, and it sucks the water out of the floodplain, which decreases the level of the river. So if you get tons of it, you're losing a lot of water, and that's pretty important to us because we sell water. We don't like to see it go out in the air. We like to see it go down into our reservoirs, and so we can use it for pumps.
They'll grow down into the riverbed and choke the channel and narrow the channel, which then when we get high floods, it can also, it'll slow the water down enough so you get a lot of sediment, which then reduces your channel and then can create flooding hazards too during times of high flow. It's going to make things a lot worse when we're dry. And then it also has a negative effect of potentially increasing flooding potentials in certain areas.
And I think that's a great point. I mean, it's not just with any of these invasives, it's not a thing that it does. It's usually a summation of forces.
There's a lot of different
There's
things.
a lot of different things, and like the plecostomus, I mean, they will like munch on the banks and stuff like that and kick up a lot of sediment, and it increases the turbidity in the stream and, degrades the banks so they're easier to wash away. It's interesting the things that happen, they're not good things that are happening, but it's interesting to see that stuff just from a geomorphological standpoint and things.
That was a $100 verse.
I got more.
I believe that.
No, he doesn't.
So do we have a lot of invasive species in the basin?
Quite a few.
Yes, off the top of my head, we certainly have zebra mussels in Belton and Lake Stillhouse Hollow, Lake Georgetown, Lake Ranger. We've had hydrilla in Lake Stillhouse Hollow. We've had water hyacinth that we still continuously battle in Lake Limestone. We've caught most of the fish that we've talked about, at least in the lower half of our basin. Salt cedar is rampant in the upper basin above PK. We'll occasionally see it during drought time start to kind of get a foothold between Possum Kingdom and Granbury. Luckily, I think there's enough flood cycles that hasn't gotten a foothold where it's really started to take over and displace the natives. You'll just see one or two pop up here or there, and then we'll have a good flood where the water levels are up, and it'll usually drown them out or scour them out. There's some others too. Alligator weed. We don't see it a lot, but it's another aquatic invasive plant. It looks very much like a native plant, so it's really hard to identify. I can't remember the technical name, but we found elephant ears and a few other things in the San Gabriel River.
Oh, elephant ears are really popular for people who have nurseries or
Yeah.
like to have plants.
Well, and it's surprising because a lot of these plants are on a list that Parks and Wildlife maintains that are not allowed to be sold in the state of Texas, but you still can go in nurseries and aquarium stores and find them.
That's a shame.
I remember being in one in Houston and walking by with my mom and was like, oh my God, they're selling giant salvinia.
So in an instance like that, did you say something?
I did.
You did.
I don't know if anything came about it, but there was a
Yeah.
phone call made. So it is definitely a problem. And it's a very hard problem to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, effort, and money,
Yeah.
and
And it's repeated effort because,
yep.
Salt cedar, I will say Texas Parks and Wildlife in the upper Brazos has a long-term treatment plan they're working on, some chemicals. For a while, they were using the salt cedar beetle, which was the beetle that caused problems in Mexico. They're having some effects, but I don't know exactly how much they've spent, but it has been a lot, and we're still, we're starting to see some benefits from that. But because it is on all sides of us, it's in the Red River Basin, it's in the Colorado Basin, it's in the Rio Grande, up in Oklahoma. It's one of those that why it was popular back in the 30s or why they thought that was better than native vegetation or necessary, I don't know. But it was used a lot, so it's almost going to be a constant effort. Every state would have to embark on a similar eradication plan everywhere it is to ever truly get rid of it. And honestly, that's probably a budget bankrupting endeavor. Parks is working really hard in the upper Brazos because we have two endangered fish, the small eye and sharp-nosed shiner, that their only place that they occupy is above Possum Kingdom and the Brazos, a little bit in the Clear Fork. They're salt tolerant species, so they're somewhat unique where the salt levels in the upper Brazos generally
So when you say upper Brazos, where is that?
Possum Kingdom and above.
Okay.
And so trying to maintain water levels in an already dry part of the state to protect those fish is critical. And they're what they call fluvial specialists. So when they breed, they broadcast their eggs onto the water. And the eggs essentially have to have enough water to float till they develop into fry and can swim on their own. So things that are going to exacerbate drought conditions and lower water levels are really important, which is why I think we're getting the, full frontal assault on the salt cedar. But it's going to be a constant maintenance issue because we have it in basins on both sides of us.
So we talked a little bit about obviously working with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. I know we keep referring it to parks, but that is their official name, is the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. On issues at Lake Limestone, are there other ways the BRA's environmental department works with invasives?
The biggest piece that we do is monitoring. We do, whenever we're collecting water quality samples, we're checking out our sites looking for invasive species and then trying to report those. When it comes to treatment and control, a lot of that responsibility per state law falls with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, but we can be the canary in the coal mine, the first warning that we're seeing something move into the basin.
Okay, yeah, because talk a little bit about that because y'all's team is all across the basin and able to do this monitoring. What does that look like? Who's doing that in y'all's department?
All of us. When we go out to a reservoir, we usually try to tie up to something. So like buoys and things like that. So with the zebra mussels, they like to attach to a hard substrate. And those buoys are a great hard substrate, So we tie up to the buoy, lean it over, and we can see if there's zebra mussels growing around the bottom of it. Before Lake Granger was known to have a population of zebra mussels in it, we would put out settlement samplers, and you could use soda can attached to some fishing line as a settlement sampler, and
That's amazing. Is that what y'all used?
no.
No. I was checking.
But what we use isn't much, further than a soda can, it's just like some probably 2 or 3 inch in diameter plates, kind of stacked on each other with some space in between them. And, those are a little more scientific because the surface area of the plates, and I'm going to get dorky about this, and you can, figure out how many mussels per square centimeter there are, but basically we were just trying to see if anything ever showed up on them. And one day we got a positive hit on it and we let Parks know, and then they did their thing, and then they officially declared it a zebra mussel positive reservoir. So,
And I think that's one of the things we didn't mention about zebra mussels that makes them so destructive. Is they have we have native freshwater mussels in our streams and rivers and in our reservoirs. They typically burrow down in the sediments in riffles between the rocks. Zebra mussels have a genetic adaptation that our mussels don't have, is they grow these structures called byssal threads, and that would allow them. Our native freshwater mussels have no way to attach to a vertical hard surface,
Oh, interesting.
but with these zebra mussels, they do. That's another reason everyone is so concerned. We now are faced with, at least in the Brazos Basin, we have one endangered freshwater mussel and one threatened freshwater mussel protected by the federal government. There are freshwater mussels all across the state that are being protected. And the zebra mussels, not only can they use those byssal threads to attach to the side of a water intake structure or the side of a boat or a propeller
or a soda can.
or a soda can. But they'll also attach on the hard shells of freshwater mussels, and they can, essentially smother out a freshwater mussel bed very quickly by just growing on top of them and using those byssal threads to attach to freshwater mussel shells. And that was Lake Belton was found by a researcher working for Fort Hood in one of the headwater streams, and she found a native mussel with a zebra mussel attached to it. That was the first sign in Lake Belton that we had a problem. And she was out doing some stream surveys at the headwaters and sent everyone a picture, us, Parks and Wildlife, and went, "Is this what I think it is?" And we all went, "Oh no."
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Those are those jaw-dropping moments. You're like, another, impact of the zebra mussels. And I think I read somewhere, and I might be getting the number wrong, that an adult zebra mussel can filter, was it 1 liter of water a day?
I don't know the exact number, but it's powerful.
So the other mussels, the mussels we like, the mussels that are
Are
important,
also filter feeders.
okay. So what's the difference between the good mussels and zebra mussels?
So you think one zebra mussel that's probably, maybe the size of a nickel, filtering a whole bunch of water. And then you think of how many zebra mussels are in a reservoir, gazillions of them, and they're filtering a gazillion liters of water, And what that does is that they're filter feeders. So that pulls out all, the plankton and all the little bits that other mussels like to eat, or even like the small fish like to eat. So, we're talking about like food webs and stuff like that. If little fish don't have anything to eat, the not so little fish don't have anything to eat the little fish, and then the fish that eats the bigger fish. So you're losing the base of your food web when you filter out all those little bits. The good mussels have always been here, and they've adapted to our system, and the bad mussels, the invasives, outcompete.
Yeah, they don't have our natives don't have the reproductive capacity of the zebras.
Yeah.
They don't have some of the reproductive strategies. So freshwater mussels are also dependent on host species. A lot of times, depending on the mussel, to basically they'll use the fish to have their babies hitch a ride to another location, and once the babies get big enough, they'll fall off. So they've got to be ready to reproduce at the right time, encounter the right fish.
Yeah.
Because it is very species specific what freshwater mussel and what fish they need. It's not just like any fish can swim by and become a taxi for their babies.
Only certain fish show taxi.
That's a
And
real.
that is a real thing.
Love that.
It's a fascinating. Freshwater mussels are fascinating. You need to get Justin in here.
Zebra mussels don't need that. They can just emit their reproductive material into the water, male and female. It mixes new babies. So they have, just like their filtering capacity, their reproductive capacity of how many babies they can produce in a year is just it's something like millions.
Yeah.
And so they could very quickly outcompete our native freshwater mussels, who have to be somewhat opportunistic and try to wait for the right fish to come down. And there's some really interesting videos out on the internet. You can watch different strategies. Some of them, the Texas fawn's foot, are threatened species. They basically use a little lure that they shoot out, and it looks like a worm or something a fish would want to eat. And so they're basically sacrificing themselves to reproduce to a certain degree. The fish eats that, swims off with the babies, and then drops them somewhere else. So that's not a real efficient reproductive strategy compared to, there's a male close by releasing their material too, and then new babies are formed and growing everywhere. So
Well, I've learned a lot.
I mean, like I said, it's a complex, ecosystems are complex, and then you throw something that doesn't belong in the ecosystem, and it can cause a lot of havoc, it costs money to fix the problem, and gosh, I could talk for days on like, different scenarios that, you can get some species of fish that aren't native to a particular stream. They might be native in Texas, and it's spotted bass and Guadalupe bass that hybridize. So, and again, everybody likes to catch fish, but, if you put the wrong fish, it's a very similar species, and they're able to mate, you get a different species, and that's called a hybrid, and so what's wrong with that, is like, well, you lose some genetic diversity when you start ending up with hybrids and stuff. And gosh, we keep focusing on zebra mussels just because they're so prevalent, and thinking of like recreational impacts. When they first got introduced, on the Great Lakes, everybody thinks that the Great Lakes are pretty great, and they had like really nice beaches and stuff like that. Zebra mussels came, and they ended up, when the zebra mussels died, their shells ended up on the beaches, and they're really sharp. So people couldn't walk on the beaches anymore, or hang out and do those fun things. And, I'm a fisherman. I love fishing the hydrilla that's in Stillhouse, it holds a lot of fish. But the bad thing about the hydrilla is it grows so much that you lose capacity in a reservoir. So, Lake Stillhouse is a core reservoir.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, the Corps of Engineers, yeah. So that reservoir's whole mission in life, besides holding water for us, is flood storage. So you get a bunch of hydrilla in there, and it's taking up capacity in a reservoir. That's reducing the amount of flood storage capacity that reservoir has.
And there are reservoirs, we've been fortunate that it's never gotten that intense on Stillhouse Hollow, but where it's so intense that, yeah, it'll wrap around and choke up your boat propeller. You can't move through it. It can get so thick that then it becomes, instead of being something fish utilize, it can prohibit their movements, and it pushes them to the outside and again reduces available habitat. So it's, and I think it's important to look at the impacts of these species too in the climate of the world we're in. Our population is growing rapidly. So every drop of water we have is important. So doing everything we can to protect our capacity in our existing reservoirs is going to be vital. Protecting infrastructure to make sure it's reliable is going to be vital. So trying to not make that goal that's already difficult to begin with because of the population explosion by introducing species is why it's so important that we would like, all our basin residents to find Goldie a new home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't dump them in the stream. Don't, or if you can't find Goldie a new home, just very, kindly, gently euthanize Goldie, or try to sell them back to a pet store.
Yeah, a lot of pet stores.
Anything other than just dumping them out in the environment, because that's just another thing that's going to take resources and make managing the finite water resources we have more difficult.
And it's not just, you kind of focused on fish tanks a little bit, but, reptiles, same
Yeah.
thing, frogs, same thing, snakes are a big one. Yeah.
And invasive snakes from South Africa that people got and then released are decimating the Florida Everglades, decimating their wild populations. It's not just snakes, it's impacting their birds, it's impacting everything else. There's another critter that got loose in Florida that I don't know if we found in Texas or not, called an apple snail.
Yeah, that's on the Texas invasive list.
Is
the
it? So
apple
someone-
snail, the
a-
giant
and-
apple snail or something like.
Yeah, and apparently it's also a voracious vegetation eater, but apparently it was a lot of the homes in Florida are stucco based, and it would munch on the stucco and was causing property damage for homeowners. So what was in the stucco that attracted it, or if it was just a way for it, that's how it moved up the wall to get somewhere else, I don't know. But you'll see the iguanas also that are loose in Florida, and it is decimating some of our most unique habitat in the nation from released species. So again, rehome it or gently and as humanely as possible euthanize it. We certainly don't want to see that level of issues here. And when you think of all the value that wetlands do in hurricane surge protection and mitigation and floods and all the other native species they support, we certainly don't want that getting into the wetlands in the lower part of our basin, Galveston Bay, Matagorda Bay. Really responsible pet ownership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who would have guessed that dumping your fish tank in the lake could have an impact on the future of water supply? What a wild correlation.
You can kind of think, oh, that's a big stretch, but it's not. There's real consequences to those actions, and like you said, it's because it's not just a person, dumping a tank, in Stillhouse Reservoir, and it's not 20 people doing it. I don't know what the real number is, but if it happens probably a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any study that's been done, to say how many people, because who's going to admit to that? Number one,
It's not anymore.
Right.
And I would guess the odds of if it was just one or two people, we probably wouldn't know about it because it wouldn't be enough of an introduction for that species to get a foothold.
And so this is Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's got at least 2 campaigns. They've got the Never Dump Your Tank, and then going back to having a boat or a kayak in lakes, they have the Clean, Drain, Dry campaign, reminding people to clean it and drain it of water and let it dry so we don't spread invasive species.
And we support them in the Clean,
Yes,
Drain, and Dry.
we're a partner on the Clean, Drain, Dry program.
All right. Well, gosh, did we leave anything out? Is there anything? I imagine you guys could talk for a long time about this.
Man, I got stories for days.
All right. Well, Tiffany, Jeremy, Thank you for joining us.
I was happy to do it. This was
No
fun.
problem. Yeah. All right. So, if while listening to this information you thought, hey, I have a follow-up question, please reach out. You can email us at information@brazos.org. We're happy to fill in any gaps we missed. So, what Brazos wonders are swirling around in that beautiful brain of yours? Don't be shy. Let us know. We want to make sure we're touching on the things that would be helpful for you. Again, our email is information@brazos.org. And with that, we're out. Thanks for joining us on Unpacking the Brazos River.